Hello, welcome to another edition of Leafless, Not Lifeless. I'm Sharon Benjamin, your host, and I am so happy that you've joined me today to hear and to view. So I have a very interesting guest today, as always. So my guest today is Donaflyn Crawford. Welcome, Donaflyn.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here as well. Donaflyn has an interesting story, as all of my guests do, and he's going to talk to us and share with us how he went from being an orphan to an author, but there's a lot in between, so we'll get into that. So Donaflyn, again, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here and to share your story with other people.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, so first of all, you became an orphan.
I did.
What led to your becoming an orphan?
Well, I was living in San Francisco, California, with my parents and my three siblings.
Okay.
And my father became ill and he passed away. I was 5 years old. He collapsed at work and was dead on arrival, leaving his wife, my mother, and us 4 children. So my mother in time meets another guy, and he ends up being not the right person.
Okay.
And unfortunately, she died at his hands. Domestic violence, he killed her.
Oh.
And this was 5 years after my father had died. So I was 10 years old. And that's how we became orphans.
So picture of your parents here, beautiful pictures. Your mother was
yes. Yes, she was. She was. She knew how to do it.
Oh, that's classy. And here with your mom and your siblings?
Yes, downtown San Francisco.
Yes. So you ended up becoming an orphan.
Yes.
And you ended up moving all the way across country.
I did. Well, they had to contact relatives. They contacted my grandmother, who lived in Omaha, Nebraska. That's where I was born. She came, and my mother had family here in DC, Washington, DC. And they came. So it ended up, one person had to take us. And it was my cousin, my mother's first cousin, who lived in Washington, DC. So she took all 4 of us. Unfortunately, there were some people who wanted just one. I'll take the girl, I'll take the boy, I'll take this one with this complexion. Unfortunately, they were picking and choosing, but this one cousin said, I'll take all 4. And she flew us across country from San Francisco to Washington, DC. This was in 1965.
So try to share with us, if you can, from a 10-year-old's perspective, the kind of trauma that you experienced.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I knew that my mother had passed before we were told. I went to bed. Before I went to bed, her boyfriend was at the house. I wanted to say goodnight to her. So I went to the kitchen where they were sitting in the kitchen talking. I got to the door and her boyfriend told me, no, you can't talk to your mother. So what am I to do? I'm a 10-year-old, he's a grown man. So I turn around and go back in my room. And this same night, my sister said, let's not go to sleep. I have a feeling something's going to happen. So when he went into the bathroom, my mother's friend, I snuck in the kitchen because I always kissed my mother goodnight. And when I got in the kitchen, she was singing. She was a dynamic singer, singing and crying. And I said, goodnight, mommy. And she kissed me goodnight. The next thing I know, we all fell completely fast to sleep, a deep sleep. And then I saw my light go on in my bedroom. It was a police officer standing at my bedroom door. And my mother's friends were there she had a group called the Crawford Spiritual Singers, and her singers were there, but my mother was nowhere to be seen. So I knew that she must have died. And from that point on, they took us away from the house. And the lady from the orphanage said, if I tell you what happened to your mother, do you promise not to cry? And we said, yes. We had an instinct when it happened. And she said, your mother is dead. I screamed at her. I called her a lie, which I would never do. I was taught better than that. But the emotions just took over. The trauma of having something like that done and then going back and seeing the crime scene, it was horrific. So I'm telling you, it is God who has kept me in my right mind, and maybe the man that I am today, because I could have flipped and gone the other way.
That's true.
But it was God. It was God.
So who's the older one in the family, you and your siblings?
My brother Julius is the oldest. He was about 13 when this happened. And then my sister Brenda, she was 12, I was 10, and the baby was 6.
So what was it like for you and your siblings to move from California to DC? How was it? How was the adjustment for you to, especially after having experienced such trauma of losing your mom and then having to move away from what kind of connected you to her?
Oh, absolutely. My mother was a woman of God, and she taught us the ways of God. She read the Bible to us. She was a choir director and a singer, and we were church kids. That was our culture in our home. We were church kids. So we came to DC, and we had to be exposed to a little different culture. Not just in the home, but the environment. I mean, I got here and they were calling people Bama. I had never heard that word Bama before. And kids were saying things that I was not familiar with. The household spoke a language that I was not familiar with. Now, this is kind of comical here. My mother had a way of being sort of, I can't think of a word to say, but she was proper. Proper in the way that she acted.
Yes.
Now, she was from the South, the deep South, but she must have picked up some culture. You know, she would set the table. You don't eat and come and get your plate. Yes. Set the table.
Right.
And but when we got to this new home, they had a different culture. So I was in the home and someone called me and she asked me, "You ate yet?" Now here I am. What? And she said, "You ate yet?" I had no idea. What is she talking? I don't know that word. And then someone screamed at me, "Did you eat?" Oh.
So it really was like a new language that you had to learn.
It was a new language, a new culture. And she had 5 kids of her own, of course. And since we were children of trauma, and we came from a mother who was dedicated to us, I mean, dedicated, we didn't have that same type of connection. She had her own children. And I think anyone who wants to take in children, especially children who have been traumatized, they need to have some counseling first, go to school first, because those kids have special needs. You know, they will feel like they're second class. So they need. How was
it for you all? Did excuse me. Now, in today's society, you do hear about children who've had certain situations are actually provided with counseling, grief counseling, etc. Did you and your siblings have any of that?
None whatsoever. Even when someone would come to check on us from the government, there was no counseling. People in people in the neighborhood who knew, that we were orphaned. They didn't talk to us. I did have some counseling about 5 years ago. I'm 67. It took all of those years. And of course, when you go through something like that, it has lifetime effects. It has lifetime effects.
So I'm wondering about survival. So you came at 10 and you and your siblings at those different ages. How did you all navigate survival?
That is an excellent question. My younger brother and I huddled together. When you saw him, you saw me. When you saw me, you saw him. And I just felt like we learned to protect each other. Even after my older siblings left, my sister and my brother, eventually they moved out. And just my little brother and I, we just felt that we had to huddle together and stick together. And so, yes, you're right, it's something of survival. And all along, I just had this feeling, this yearning in my heart that said, I want my mother. I never verbalized it, but it was in me, just a yearning. I want my mother.
Isn't it amazing how, and I've seen children whose mothers are still living and people can make different comments, etc. But I've always said, and I have no training in the area of psychology or anything in that area either, but what I have noticed that children always want their moms.
Absolutely. Moms always made it better. When I would be outside playing, my mother was living. If I got hurt, she would be the one not just to do the first aid, but to comfort me and to hug me and whatever it took to make me feel better. If my nose was bleeding, I get up at night, Mommy, my nose is bleeding. Never any harsh words. She would get out of her bed, go in the bathroom with me and take care of my nose. I would never feel like I had done something wrong or that I had disturbed her. So when she passed, I didn't feel that I had that connection where I could do that. And sometimes I didn't tell about things that were bothering me because I felt like I just couldn't get that same type of response that I would get from my mother.
So up until 5 years ago, you were suppressing a lot of things.
Absolutely. And when I went to the psychologist, now here I am in my 60s, and I'm sitting there talking to the psychologist, and we got on a question that hit a nerve. And I broke down and I bawled and cried like I was that 10-year-old boy. And there was nothing she could do to console me. It just poured out and I cried and cried and cried and cried.
So or did your other siblings get any counseling, or they just decided to quote unquote handle it on their own?
My oldest brother did not. He left the home very early. He left and he was a teenager. He went into Vietnam and he never got any counseling. My sister went to counseling after she was an adult also. My younger brother, he went, but it had a reverse reaction for him. Instead of helping him, I guess it brought things to the surface and he wasn't able to handle it.
So Donaflyn, you were in DC and now you're trying to adjust and you make it through that part of your life and you decide to get married at 18.
Yes.
Is that a decision to try to find some kind of normalcy, some kind of support? What were you expecting? Because most 18-year-olds, even at that time, and you and I are close to the same age,
yeah,
we're not looking at marriage.
That's right. Yeah, it was very unusual. And I think because of how I grew up from 10 on, made me grow up quick. I had to grow up very fast. And I was in high school, at Coolidge High School, and I saw this young lady who I liked, and she appeared to like me. So I decided to go for it. And I fell in love with her as a teenager. I really fell in love with her. And we started talking about getting married. Now, she came from a complete home, unbroken home, where I was coming from, a broken home. So I guess maybe I needed that situation, someone to help me navigate through being a broken and traumatized child. And I guess everyone could not be married to someone like that, because we're special needs children.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we needed special needs. And for example, after we got married, I needed her with me. If we're in our apartment, I wanted her in the room, not in another room, but I wanted her to be there. So there was something going on with me that I felt that I was needy, very needy for many, many, many years. Maybe until after our children grew up, that I became a little more relaxed and was able to sort of live on my own.
Stand on your own 2 feet.
Absolutely, stand on my own 2 feet.
So you get married at 18, and you and your wife, Tina, become parents by the time you're 20.
Yes, I was
19.
I was 19 and she was 20.
Okay.
Yeah, so I say sometimes that I'm the baby in the family, but she reminds me that it's less than 2 months. But when I got married, I wanted a child right away.
Did you feel like that would fill some kind of void for you? Or it was just something you wanted?
It was just something I wanted, but there's always those things that we don't know about that are going on in the back of our minds. Maybe I wanted security. Maybe I wanted love or something to call my own, because when we left San Francisco, when Mom died, we had to leave everything. Left my friends, my church, my school, my toys, everything I was familiar with, I had to leave. I recall having a stuffed animal that I would sleep with. It was a Lassie, a dog Lassie stuffed animal. And I would sleep with that even at 10 years old, because I was always scared at night. Well, when we were leaving, I wanted to take it with me. And I asked an adult, can I take Lassie with me? And they said, no. So I took Lassie and hid him behind a trash can. So we had lost everything. So who knows, maybe by having a child that I can have something of my own.
So growing up, so you're traumatized 10-year-old, get married at 18, lost both parents, lost everything else that was familiar to you. So now you're married, no biological parents.
Right.
What was something that was extremely challenging for you? I know you mentioned that, you know, when you got married, you wanted Tina with you at all times, but what are some of the other challenges that you faced based on all that you had experienced up to that point?
Well, that terrible experience caused me to be a worrier. I mean, to the extreme. I would go places so that I could worry, so I could be alone. I want to just be alone so I can just sit down and worry. I was afraid that something was going to happen to my children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, terrified. I would be at work and the phone would ring, and the first thing would come to my mind is, oh no, one of my children. And the phone could be for anyone in the office, but just the terror of, I guess, repeating what happened in my childhood. So that was a big challenge for me. I was extremely worried about something bad happening.
So over the years, with what you just said, have you noticed, or did you notice that it actually affected your physical health? Or or did that not happen?
Well, I did have a physical challenge and something I'm dealing with even right now, that maybe some of this trauma from what happened to my mother, to my growing up, the survival that I experienced today. I was wondering, I was having problem speaking and singing. You know, I love to sing.
Yes, and beautifully, I might add.
Well, thank you. I started having trouble with my voice. I couldn't sing the higher notes that I used to. And it felt as though something was in my throat. You know, I would try to clear my throat. It wouldn't work. I went to the doctor, went to another doctor. They couldn't find anything. And finally they found it. And it's called spasmodic dysphonia, where the muscles are contracting. And it was mentioned to me that was interesting because my mother was strangled. Could that be something? Could that be part of it? So I'm being treated for it even now. I get Botox shots in my throat, like every 3 months. And after that, I can sing and I can speak clearly. But without it, my voice gets raspy. I can't talk very loud. So I'm wondering, is this all a part of the trauma that I went through?
That's interesting. Now, the marriage at 18.
Yes.
To Miss Tina, here we go.
Yes.
And so you all have been married for how many years now?
Well, 49, this year will be 50 years.
Wow.
50 years.
Awesome. That
it's
is awesome.
Unbelievable.
Wow, what a wife you have. And when you think about all of the situation that you talked about, and not only that, but you have quite a crew here.
Yes, we have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They're all in their 40s now.
Oh, wow.
The one in the middle of the sofa there, he is 48 now. Yes.
Get out. Wow.
Yeah, he's 48. And then 3 grandchildren and my daughter-in-law, Nicole.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, God has blessed us and given me family of my own.
Yes, yes, that is amazing. That is beautiful. So Donaflyn, you have worked in the insurance industry?
Yes, I was there from 1973 until 1998.
And in the education field?
Yes, I was there for about 7 or 8 years.
Okay. And now you are in ministry. You and Tina are in ministry.
Yes.
Tell us about the ministry.
Well, I was a member when I came here. I joined Star of Bethlehem, Bishop Harvey Lewis Sr. and Mother Lewis. And at some point, I branched out on my own. My sister, who is also a pastor, asked me if I would take over her church because she was moving on to another congregation. This was in around year 2000. So I agreed to do it. I had already had a dream that coincided with me becoming a pastor. So I just walked out there on it. But in time, the ministry changed from a church ministry to an outreach. We were doing church, in the brick and mortar, and outreach at the same time. But in time, we went completely full-time outreach. And what we do, we have 2 locations. They are assisted living homes. One is in Oxon Hill, Maryland. One's in Accokeek. And we go there and we have church service with the residents. Now, sometimes church, we minister to the same people all the time. But there are people that are not coming to church who need to hear the word of God. And they are senior citizens, orphans like I was at one time, and people out on the street who never come into a church. Yes. So God has people in different places with different ministries to reach everyone. So we should find our where God wants us to be. And it may not be in the church. It might be someplace else, but to fulfill our calling.
That's a great point, because Donaflyn, you and I both know that often when people get their license to preach, they're ordained. So often people are looking to get an opportunity to stand at the pulpit.
Yes.
But ministry, as you just mentioned, ministry is everywhere. You may not have a church, but there are people that you pass on the street.
Absolutely.
That you see in the grocery store.
That's right.
That you see when you go wherever you go. Maybe you're in the park.
Yes.
So ministry is really full time.
It is full time. I like that. That is so true.
Yes, and even so, if you are really called, you can actually quote unquote preach without a building.
Without a building, without a license.
Yes.
The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers.
It's very plentiful.
Yes.
It's very plentiful. Well, you went from being an orphan to a husband of 49 years, almost 50 years, a father, a grandfather, but you are also an author. Tell us about these books.
Oh, yes. Well, the Lord blessed me to write 4 books. I'm on the 5th right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So the book that's in the back there, From the Water, I normally give that away free, but this little book is more of a booklet. And all of them are booklets. They aren't very big. But this book talks about my spiritual experiences, such as an out-of-body experience I had after my mother passed, about my getting hit by a car and didn't tell, just a different thing that happened. The time when I went to a church revival, and a woman, people who talk about women's ministries, this powerful woman of God laid her hands on my head. I had no idea what was going to happen. She said, "Say Jesus." I said, "Jesus." I was young, and she did it. She said, "Say it again." And I said, "Jesus." And the power of God, of the Holy Spirit, fell on me in such a way I had never experienced in my life. I began speaking in another language I had not learned, I did not know. So I covered that also in this book, From the Water. March 13th, 1965, that tells more detail about the death of my parents. March 13th is the last day that I saw her. I spoke about going to the kitchen to speak to her and kiss her goodnight. Yes, she actually passed on March 14th after 12 midnight. So I cover some of that in there. Mary Ellen Williams Foster, Granny, that is my great grandmother, my father's grandmother, whose parents were slaves. And even though she was born after slavery, she too lived on a plantation and suffered. Her back was broken. She was a midwife. So I talk about her, and what I do or did, I got stories from things I was told, and I built on those stories to make it a longer story. So it's both facts I've learned and fiction, because I built on the stories. When Grace Prevails was the second book. And this book came about because of a dream. After writing the first book, I saw a book in my dream. I couldn't read the title, but it was laying on top of the first book. So I took that as though I'm supposed to write a second book. I didn't know what to write about. So I just started. And this book is about a young man who has an anger problem. And his anger gets him in very bad trouble. He loses his job. And the wonderful thing about this is, during this time, I was going to a psychologist myself. And she asked me for a copy of the book for her practice. So that was really wonderful to see that it's not going to just be something for entertainment, but also to help someone else. And the last book I'm working on, it will be out as soon as I can get it finished, is about my mother's singing ministry. She was asked to come to sing at Macon Auditorium, which is a big auditorium in Macon, Georgia, where she was from. And people told me about that day. So I built the story with that in it and some of the other experiences that she had in her singing career. So that's pretty much it.
That is amazing. That is worth congratulating you for this work.
Thank you.
For others that you're working on.
Thank you.
So how can people get in touch with you, find out about the ministry?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can find me on Facebook. The ministry page is Christian Family Fellowship Center Outreach Ministry. Christian Family Fellowship Center Outreach Ministry on Facebook, or on Facebook, Donaflyn Crawford. And my book is also being sold at Etsy. And
Go ahead.
Yes. Yes, on Etsy, the last book that From the Water, I'm sold out of. So I will be reordering that. So it will be available also.
So are you self-publishing or?
I am self-publishing. I'm doing everything myself. And my wife is helping me to proofread. And thank God we're living in the times we're living now with technology.
Yes.
Because I can have the computer read the book to me over and over, and I can make corrections while it's reading to me.
That is amazing. Well, congratulations, Donaflyn. I'm so glad that you took the time to share with the Leafless, Not Lifeless audience and to share your story as to how you and your siblings might have seemed leafless, but you were actually growing and developing, even though you were going through that trauma.
Absolutely.
You were growing and developing, and look at all that the Lord has done. And,
absolutely.
You know, and my background, really, I got the impetus for the show because the trees in our backyard, I was out there last winter before last, and I was thinking, I saw them and I thought, leafless, not lifeless.
Yes.
Because when you look at the trees, although there may not be any leaves, you know that something is going on. Growth is taking place because by spring you see the leaves.
Absolutely.
So
wonderful.
So when you see, you know, people might have seen you when you were 10, 12, 14, 18, and it might have seemed as if you were just going right along, but you were actually growing and developing. So
that is right.
So much. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
For the listeners and viewers, if you have a story you'd like to share, please contact me at leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com, leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com, and I hope to see you the next time. Thanks again, Donaflyn.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.